be touching on your three main pillars as far as immigration is concerned. Of course, the major topic being immigration. The second major topic of tonight's conversation or webinar will be recruitment, and then, of course, relocations. So that would essentially be the three main foundations or pillars of immigration. And then, of course, the fourth and final point, why is now quite an important time for those that are looking to consider this a good time to actually get started? What's currently happening in the market at the moment? What is Canada currently going through? What is Australia currently going through? And ultimately, why is there such a demand for foreign skilled professionals to get over? So discussing the immigration pathway, who is New World Immigration? Those of you that have also just joined, we've been operating for just over 10 years, over 100 years of combined immigration experience. We, of course, are registered through MARA as well as the ICCRC, which is registration through the relevant authorities of both Canada as well as Australia. All right. We are based in Cape Town, Century City. For those of you that are in Cape Town at any point in time and you'd like to visit our offices, and we make a mean cup of coffee as well, so please feel free, come in. We'd love to meet you in person. So those of you that have not yet started this particular process, of course, we would need to understand from beginning to end what happens when we embark on this process. So initially, you've been in contact with a consultant. They've gone through the qualifying criteria to establish which particular country you qualify for based on a well-structured points assessment that these countries both work with. And we also have determined that your profession is in high demand in the respective country that you are looking to go to. And of course, you've got highly relevant qualifications. Ultimately, these countries are looking for what it is that you do for a living. When we bring you on board and you've become a paying client of New World Immigration and you've retained us as an immigration firm, you'll then be assigned to a case manager who specializes within your particular field of expertise. You'll then, of course, arrange for a consultation with your case manager to discuss the documentation checklist that you'll have available via the online portal that each and every one of you have given access to, or been given access to, should I say. From that point, you'll then supply us with documentation requirements throughout the process, and we'll then vet, ensure that each document meets immigration standards as well as New World Immigration standards. And at that point, the second final point would then be submission of your application, and then, of course, the visa grant notice to either Canada or Australia. In actual fact, my colleague Jenny, one of our head case managers in our Canadian department, just notified me now that a work permit had been approved after a relatively long period of time to Canada. There were a few complications here and there that we had to get through, but finally we had phoned the client, and to say the least, it was one of the most emotional phone calls that I've had in a very long time. It's a very humble experience to be in that position, to know that you eventually have changed a mother and two children's lives. It's quite something. Leo, are you still admitting candidates coming into the boardroom or the meeting?
Yes.
Perfect,
Yes, sir, I am. All right, cool.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so those of you that are embarking on the Australian process, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen that states have reopened this week. We are waiting on one or two more states to finally open, which is New South Wales as well as Western Australia. And Australia started their new financial year in the beginning of July. So these stats that you'll see in front of you now are the allocated visas for each particular state across Australia. So if you're looking to apply for a subclass 190, which is a permanent residency pathway, whether you're looking to apply for a subclass 491, which is a skilled pathway, so both these options are a skilled pathway. And those of you that are looking at going under the business innovation or the investment stream, each state, as you will see, from Australian Capital Territory all the way down to Western Australia or WA, you'll see that they've given an exact allocation figure of how many families will receive an invite from that state from July of this year till next year, July. That is Australia's financial year. Now, a lot of people that I've sent this information to have looked at these figures and they say, wow, you know, New South Wales is looking to allocate and bring in 7,160 families. I have a lot of time to get my affairs in order for me to apply to New South Wales. Cut a long story short, ladies and gentlemen, is that each and every one of these states have practically been closed since COVID started, which means it's basically been 2.5 years for these states to have closed. That has meant a lot of people that have been waiting for states have gotten a lot of their affairs in order and steps that would need to have been done in order for you to apply to this or these particular states. What that means, prior to COVID, these particular numbers were met every single year. They generally meet these numbers within a space of anywhere between 10 and 12 months during the financial year. Now, if we put that into practical terms as it stands between 2022 and 2023, because states have been closed over 2.5 years, that means that these allocated numbers will be reached a lot faster than 10 to 12 months, purely because of the fact that these states have been closed. So those of you that are looking at these numbers and you're looking at going to a prospective state like Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, Western Australia, there are particular steps that we would recommend that you start off with before you start applying to these particular states. You cannot apply to a particular state without a valid skills assessment, which I'll be touching on shortly, as well as an up-to-date English language test. So those of you that have already gotten that process on the way or finalized, you are open to applying to these relevant states should your profession be in high demand in that particular state. Throughout the immigration journey, a major topic of discussion with any family that is looking and embarking and looking to immigrate with their family, with their relatives, what happens with job placement? What happens with job security? And that's a very valid point. What happens? So we've got the area of visas sorted. Okay, so we know that New World Immigration has qualified us. We know which visa we can go ahead with. We can get to the respective country within X amount of time frame. But what happens with recruitment, placement opportunity, and ultimately securing a job offer? We founded New World Immigration Recruitment. A chap by the name of Luke Viviers, who is our recruitment manager, has helped us build this particular department day on day, where he's created partnerships and agreements with local companies in both Canada as well as Australia to help our existing onboard clients to navigate the job market, understand the job market, and ultimately secure work opportunity. This is a value-added service, ladies and gentlemen, that we have created. This, by the way, is not a guarantee where each and every one of you can imagine that we can help you get into the door, but whatever happens within that recruitment realm or that interview space, that is left up to the employee and employer. So we've connected with employers and recruitment agencies abroad, once on board as a New World Immigration client, you'd be granted exclusive access and feature to this department. And of course, we've created it for the purpose of assisting New World Immigration clients in obtaining job offers in either Canada or Australia. This, by the way, this particular process generally starts to take place once a candidate has also completed their skills assessment. So as we touched on the fact that you're applying to a particular state or a regional area in Australia, for an example, or you've pinpointed a particular province in Canada where it is that you're looking to reside, your first point of call is to complete your skills assessment as well as your English language tests in order for you to become employable. It makes it far more easier for a foreign employer to screen your profile or your CV and your portfolio and get to an interview stage a lot faster and easier once they recognize the fact that your qualifications and your work experience is recognized and on par with that relevant country's standards or the relevant country's standards, whether it may be Canada or Australia, which I'm sure each and every one of you have already seen. That is the very first thing that we actually get started with. That's the very first thing that we actually quote for on services to begin with. A couple of stats just to consider here when looking at employment opportunities and what opportunities and what the economies are like in a nutshell when it comes to Australia and both Canada. Australia has hit its lowest unemployment rate, which is at 3.5%. It's never been this low since 1974. In the first quarter of 2022, there were over 480,000 vacant jobs across Australia. Canada's unemployment rate is sitting at a record low 5.1%. The demand for workers across Canada, unemployment declines, job vacancies rise. The reality of what's happening in both Canada as well as Australia is that back in the 1950s and the latter parts of 1940s, there was a baby boom effect that took place. And what's happened now is that a lot of those families or people that were born at that point in time are now going into retirement, which means a lot of the population going into retirement that leaves a large gap within the employment market open. Local companies and recruiters are struggling to find locals to fulfill local opportunities. Domestic universities are also not qualifying candidates quick enough to actually tend to the amount of opportunities that are being created. And I'm not saying that people are taking 10 years to complete a degree. Don't get me wrong. They're completing degrees or diplomas or trade certificates within the time frame that they need to. It's just that with the job opportunities that are arising, the rate at which candidates are employing is not actually, or rather being qualified, is not actually keeping up with the rate at which employment opportunities are becoming available. This is why you are in high demand. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned in the beginning of tonight's webinar, I'd mentioned three main pillars, which would include immigration, recruitment, and last but not least, the relocation division. Shelley Fall will, of course, give us a sneak peek of the relocations division. Of course, I'll do that on her behalf, but Shelley Fall, as you'll see her picture there, she's a former senior case officer that had previously worked for the Australian High Commission in Pretoria. Shelley Fall had the very final decision on approving or declining a family's visa of entering Australia. It's given us a lot of inside scoop of what the Australian government is ultimately looking for from an applications perspective. As we know, that both Canada and Australia unfortunately find reason to decline applications. Someone like Shelley Fowle gives us a lot of insight as to what it is that they're looking for so we can best prepare your application. But in the sake of relocation, she heads up our relocations department. So when you and your family require assistance from financial migration, removal of freighting, documentation services, pet relocation to property, as well as flights and accommodation, Shelley Fowle would be able to assist, guide, and provide you with the necessary support that you and your family require during your journey with New World Immigration. So once you've logged onto your online portal and you've become a client and retained New World Immigration of our services, you'd be able to log onto your portal, select the relocations tab, and you'd then be able to select the necessary support and submit that. Shelley Fowle will receive that request from you, and should then be able to provide the necessary support and guidance on each particular topic that you need a hand with. Just sneak peek on a couple of partners that we've partnered with. Of course, moving to a new relocation location, should I say, can be exciting for some, but of course stressful for others. We've of course designed the relocation division in order for us to add value by adding our clients with being in a position to plan their relocation easier. This is done with the assistance and guidance of our partners who offer specialized services. Many of you are also trying to find out further information on the respective country that you're looking to immigrate to. One of the tabs that you'll also have access to is an ebook or an information or a research pack on the country that you're looking to immigrate to. For an example, if you're looking to immigrate to Australia, you'd be able to go and download a PDF document of about 128 pages. So it's quite the document, but it gives you exact and insightful information on banking, how to enroll your kids into school, how to enroll into Medicare. When it comes to Canada, how you'd be able to enroll your newborn kids as a permanent resident to get access to government grants and funding. Leo, if you're there, you recently spoke to one of your clients that are in Canada. I can't remember the amount exactly, but what was the amount that your client was receiving per child from the Canadian government? I wonder if Leo's there. If he's not, it was in the region of around about anywhere between $600 and $800 per child that the Canadian government. Leo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, I was just about to ask you with regards to your client who's based in, I think she's based in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, you remember when she was mentioning what she was actually getting paid by the Canadian government for each child that she...
Yes, so
yeah.
So the Canadian government pays a grant for every child. If your child becomes a permanent resident of Canada, you get $600. But if you also, if you have a child who's going to daycare, as you know that you don't pay for education, but when a child is a toddler or a baby, they go for daycare. The government pays 75% towards that. So let's say, for example, you've got two kids, right? One is a toddler, one is in primary school. You get $1,200 for the two kids. That's for the grant, and then the little one will get an additional $644, which goes towards, depending on how much you pay, the government pays 75% out of that as well.
That's a huge benefit, ladies and gentlemen, considering the fact of what we spend. Thanks, Leo. I appreciate that. And if we look at what it is that we spend on a month-to-month basis, you know, as I said earlier on, I'm going to be a father soon, and what the average family happens to pay for medical aid as well as schooling in South Africa, it becomes quite an expense, so at least in that regard, with a lot of support and structure and financial support by both of these governments, it allows you to, of course, have a little bit more of a disposable income in order for you to cater towards other things. That's probably why Canadians as well as Australians travel as much as what they do. So during the particular process of immigration, there are going to be 6 main topics that we're going to be ultimately focusing on when it comes to the relocation of your family heading over to either Canada or Australia. I'm going to be touching on these steps. So by the time you've actually found yourself in the respective country, you've done the necessary due diligence of ticking off these major boxes. So for an example, steps to enroll into Medicare and how to get a family doctor. Centrelink, where permanent residents have access to funding from the government to help them set up, as Leo said, and this is both in Canada as well as Australia. As Leo also mentioned, if you have children, you may be eligible for government-funded payments for the cost of raising children. There are sites, government sites, for both Canada as well as Australia, where your spouse is also able to find and secure work before arriving. This allows you to type in key occupation codes in specific areas within a state or throughout the country in order for you to pinpoint work opportunity for your spouse. How to get a tax number, how to open up a bank account, how to apply for a driver's license, and then finally, finding home or finding a house. As we go through this process with you and your family, you will start to check off a list of these things that have been done prior to leaving South Africa. So when you land in both either Australia or Canada, you're completely set up. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you that are immigrating to Australia, I will be touching on a similar topic for Canada as well. But we've partnered with a expat, Chamonix, who's based in Australia. We've partnered with her because she's been there for 17 odd years. She's done a lot of work, both in the public as well as private sector, to ultimately understand and help the government navigate immigration. She's not an immigration lawyer. She's not an immigration consultant like New World Immigration. She basically has put together an educational package to help the family understand the journey of what it is that you'll be going through prior to landing in Australia. So it's a comprehensive course on everything you need to know to make your journey to Australia a success and as easy as possible. She'd be able to provide you with templates as well as cheat sheets to assist you with many processes along the way. She'd then also be able to set up over 15 group Zoom sessions with an Australian job migration expert, migration mindset coach, and many more. A dedicated community of like-minded people to carry and support each other along the way. I'm part of many of these Facebook groups. They are absolutely powerful. It allows you to speak with fellow candidates in your industry in Australia in order for you to really understand, and it's coming directly from the horse's mouth. A lot of these, or the courses would of course include bonus courses or material settling made easy to help you find your feet in Australia and become a local in a short period of time. Of course, this information in this course is educational. It is not coming from a migration or legal advice, which is where New World Immigration comes in. Chamonix service as well as her courses, they're both a general package as well as a VIP package. The packages are fantastic. We'd be able to introduce you to her packages when we embark on the skills assessment, so you can start better planning from a mental perspective, and to mentally get stuck into what it is that you're going to be embarking on throughout this journey to Australia. So heading towards the end of tonight's webinar, a quick reminder: after being qualified and making payments to New World Immigration, you'd be assigned a case manager. We'd basically want to get to this particular point of the submission of your application before states close. What's happening in both Canada and Australia, they are selecting foreign candidates to now come into these countries. Both of these countries have a selected cap of how many foreign candidates they're able to bring in over the next financial year. Again, because both of these countries were ultimately closed during COVID, like we had our own lockdown for quite a long time. Of course, these countries, as you know, had it themselves, and you couldn't actually get into one of these countries, or it became quite difficult. Now that these countries are open, it's created a massive portion of families globally that are applying to these particular states. You ultimately want to find yourself in a position to apply to these respective countries now that they are selecting, allocating, and bringing families in. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in this industry for long enough to also understand that these particular programs do not last forever. And this is not a sales tactic. This is not a sales conversation that I'm bringing up here. It's the harsh reality of supply and demand. Once the supply has been met by its demand, like anything, like any industry, as I'm sure each and every one of you have that same concept in your industries, same concept applies here. Once the supply has met its demand, that particular state or country would ultimately close to that profession. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure of hosting tonight's webinar. I'd like to thank each and every one of you once again for joining. This webinar will be recorded, or it has been recorded, so I'll be able to send you the recording for those of you that have just been admitted. And those of you that could not make it, I'd be able to send this to you as well. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free, pop a message over to your consultant. I know many of you have already sent me a few messages on WhatsApp. I'll be able to answer them as quickly as I possibly can. Most importantly, guys, your skills assessments right now is going to be putting you in the best position, A, to apply for work opportunity, but to also plan. One tries to plan to get into the country. Unfortunately, that's putting the cart in front of the horse. We need to try and plan with things that we have tangible to our names to plan accordingly and to plan most effectively. You want to have your skills assessment done as well as your language test done to also better understand where your profession is in high demand. When you get into the job market, you've got that as ammunition to your advantage to apply for work opportunity, whether it's through Luke, our recruitment manager, or whether it's independently through LinkedIn or via another source. Ladies and gentlemen, again, it's been a real pleasure. I wish each and every of you a wonderful evening. Those of you that have joined me from New World Immigration, thank you so much for joining. I thank you once again. And we look forward to helping each and every one of you going through this process and this journey. Have a great evening and look after yourself. Goodbye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.